Many of you watching this video already know and understand very well that Joe Biden hates black people, and that's an understatement to say the very least. I'm actually being very nice right now by just leaving that statement at that and not elaborating on it. Now, like I said, most of us already know this, but oftentimes when that statement is being made, our minds tend to default to black Americans. And I'm here to tell you that that is definitely not the case, because Biden's hatred for black people is global, with a very strong disdain for Africans. Now, one of the stories that have gone under the radar in regards to his disdain for Africans is how the Biden administration routinely disrespects African news outlets by refusing to call on them whenever the White House holds a press briefing. You see, what the African news outlets don't understand is that when you're sitting in that press room, you're simply there for show. You're not there to talk, and you're not there to ask any questions. You are there simply for the optic of making the Biden administration not look like an anti-black racist administration. That's what you're there for. And the discrimination that you see happening within the Biden administration press room is no different from the report that came out a few months back of the mass exodus of black Biden administration staffers. Now, I covered this story back then, and in short, the Biden administration hired a bunch of black people to work all of the do-nothing nonsense positions in his administration. And while on the job, they are completely ignored and disregarded, to say the very least. And because of that, after close to 2 years of disrespect and disregard, the black staffers have begun leaving the Biden administration en masse. Now, just as a refresher, I would like to take a moment to play a quick segment of my video titled Al Sharpton hopelessly defends Joe Biden after black staffers walk out on the administration en masse, where I read a few paragraphs from this political article that explains how Biden essentially hired black Americans to work do-nothing dead-end positions in his administration. At least 21 black staffers have left the White House since last year or are planning to leave soon. Some of those who remain said it's no wonder why. They describe a work environment with little support from their superiors and fewer chances for promotion. The departures have been so pronounced that, according to one current and one former White House official, some black aides have adopted a term for them, Blacksit. The first big exit came in December when Kamala Harris' senior advisor and chief spokesperson Simone Sanders announced that she was leaving, ultimately for a gig at MSNBC. The reason for the departures may vary, but the totality of them has not gone unnoticed within the ranks, according to interviews with 9 current and former black White House officials. 3 black staffers who currently work in the White House and were granted anonymity because of fear of reprisal said that the exodus has hurt morale, compounding problems that exist elsewhere. They described an operation in which mentorship is hard to come by, and opportunity to move up the ranks of the tight-knit operation is exponentially rare. We're here and we're doing a lot of work, but we're not decision makers, and there's no real path towards becoming decision makers, said one of the current black White House officials. There is no real feedback, and there's no clear path of any kind of promotions. They brought in a ton of black people generally to start without ever establishing an infrastructure to retain them or help them be successful, said the third current black White House official. If there is no clear infrastructure of how to be successful, you become just as invisible in this space than you would be if you were not in it. So as you can see, all this talk about Biden having the most diverse cabinet in American history is all smoke and mirrors. And I'm going to continue to further prove this point by going into the fact that the Biden administration has a recognizable pattern of discrimination towards African news outlets whenever the White House holds a press briefing. Now, on May 13th, former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki delivered her last press briefing before passing the baton over to Karine Jean-Pierre. Now, after ignoring African news outlets again, in that briefing, Simon Atiba stood up for himself and other African news outlets who are routinely ignored by the Biden administration whenever a briefing is being held. Now, here's a quick clip of the exchange that took place.
Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question from the
On the issue of the formula
Jen,
shortage.
can I ask you a question from the
please
back?
stop.
I understand, but
Simon,
for 15 months you have been
On the issue of formula.
and I'm saying that for the sake of equity, we should
First of all,
have
thank you
pressure
for your
across
service,
the
and
room.
thank you for your
That's what
husband
I'm
for your
saying.
service as well. On the
Doesn't
issue
make
of
sense to
formula,
preach
I
equity
think
outside,
if anything,
inside
this
the
crisis
briefing
has
room,
reminded
we can
everyone
have
that this is
questions.
Simon,
not
if you could respect your colleagues and other media and reporters in here, that would be greatly appreciated. Go ahead, Mary.
If
anything,
that's what I'm asking you.
Sir,
if you can
please.
spread the
If if anything, this has reminded, I think, the entire
And
country
all
and the
of us
world
at
that
the
this
bank
is not
today
a
would love
luxury
to
item, but an
question.
essential. Thank you.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki's final briefing with reporters went off the rails Friday after one reporter repeatedly shouted a question about fair access in the room, as Psaki began to take questions after fighting back tears as she thanked members of the administration and the press corps. Simon Atiba, the chief White House correspondent for Today News Africa, was heard yelling from the back of the press briefing room. "Why don't you take questions from across the room?" Atiba asked, as Associated Press reporter Zeke Miller attempted to get things started with a query about the ongoing baby formula shortage. "Why don't you take questions from across the room? Because that's not what you've done for the past 15 months, Atiba shouted again. Since covering the Biden administration, Atiba has frequently sparred with Psaki, going as far as to accuse her of lying about C-19-related travel restrictions in December. The same month, Atiba accused the restrictions of being racist, as they targeted Southern African countries. Now remember, this took place on May 13th. And the reason that I have that date highlighted is because by the end of that month, May 31st, a form of retaliation took place when, as the article title reads, African reporter who heckled Psaki says payments firm Axe cites subscription income. The African journalist who interrupted Jen Psaki's final White House press briefing earlier this month says the financial processing company Stripe is cutting off his publication's income. Today News Africa correspondent Simon Atiba provided the Post with copies of messages informing him that his website's offer of a lifetime subscription for $1,490 violated Stripe company policy, and therefore he'd have to start from scratch with another payment processor. The initial email added that the decision could be appealed. In a subsequent Monday email, however, the company told Atiba, whose Africa-focused outlet also offers $149 yearly subscriptions, that its decision was final. These devils stay on code, don't they? Just like that, all of a sudden, Atiba violated company policy. Okay, sure he did. Now, as I stated earlier, the Biden administration has a repeated pattern of ignoring African news outlets. And as you'll see here, earlier this month, Biden's press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre completely refused to acknowledge another African news outlet, prompting the reporter to stand up for herself in the same fashion that Simon Atiba did against Jen Psaki. Now let's first read this tweet and then we'll get into the actual video. Do you have something against African reporters? A day after the U.S. announced its new strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa, and with a new commander assuming command of AFRICOM today, African reporters say that they have to beg for questions from Biden's press secretary.
About what happened yesterday.
Afterwards, between the Justice Department and President Biden.
One question for Africa, Karine.
I'm going to come back, guys.
Thank you. Why do we always have to beg for questions? Africans deserve questions as well, Karine. Come on.
What is the latest on
Can I have a question, Karine?
Okay, I'll take a couple more questions. Okay, I'm going to take guys. Go ahead. Okay. Give me a second.
We have been asking for
Go ahead.
questions for
Go ahead.
every time. And even when you give questions to Simon, it's because he forced. We don't need to force for question. We also deserve to have a question.
I will get.
Do you have something against African reporters?
On Afghanistan.
I will get.
Do you have something against African reporters?
On Afghanistan, Jake Sullivan said last year that there was going to be an extensive top-to-bottom review of the drone, how that went.
Can you start again because someone was yelling over you?
Afghanistan. Jake Sullivan said last year.
Ladies and gentlemen, Karine Jean-Pierre is the perfect example of how much black faces in high places means absolutely nothing. When you rewatch that clip, look at her body language and the look of disgust on her face when that African woman was sticking up for herself and other African news outlets. Karine doesn't share any camaraderie with black people. Whether you are Black American, African, or from the Caribbean, she views herself as being above us all. I'm not black, I'm Karine Jean-Pierre, and I've been accepted into the fold of the dominant society. That's what she thinks. And that's why you saw that level of disgust on her face when being called out and questioned about the continuous discrimination shown toward African news outlets. You see, this is why when I hear news about the first black this and the most black that, I completely ignore it because it means absolutely nothing. These black faces in high places serve as a buffer for Biden and other government officials to hide behind so that they can say, hey, how can we be practicing anti-black discrimination when our press secretary is black? How can it be discrimination when the person that you're charging looks like you? Well, the reason that I can charge them with discrimination is because behind the back of every black sock puppet is the hand of a good old-fashioned anti-black racist. And that pattern is one that is very easy to recognize. Pay attention to the patterns. And with all that being said, that does it for today's video. So please make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. All social media links will be pinned in the comment section below. Please make sure you text tdhiphop to number 33222. That's tdhiphop to number 33222. That way you'll get a direct text notification whenever I release a new video, but it also serves as a protection plan for myself in case YouTube ever gives this channel the axe. I'll be able to send you a direct link to where you can find me next. And last but not least, for those of you who have a love and appreciation for the work that I put in on this channel, the number one way you can show your support is through Patreon. For only $3 a month, that will help put me in position to take TD Hip Hop Media off of YouTube. Remember, the goal is not to grow big on YouTube, but to grow independent of YouTube. And for those who have issues with joining Patreon, you could also hit the join button that's next to the subscribe button, and that way you can become an official channel member for as little as $3 a month as well. And lastly, if you have not already, please make sure you join the emailing list. There is no way that I can go independent of YouTube if I cannot take the audience with me. And the link to that will be pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you for your time, and until the next video, peace.